We are reading The Coven by Harper L. For those who love them villainous. Trigger and content warnings. The Coven is a dark paranormal romance with gothic vibes and a dark academia setting. The male lead in this series is pushy, domineering, and manipulative. He goes beyond my typically morally gray anti-hero and is, in my opinion, an actual villain who gets his happily ever after. Triggers include dubious consent, forced feeding, graphic violence, rough and explicit sexual content, forced proximity, betrayal, references to past abuse and traumatic reactions to triggering stimuli, knife violence, graphic depictions of blood, physical harm inflicted upon the main character, and ritualistic murder. Legacies of Crystal Hollow. Crystal Hollow is a school, if you haven't read, that part. Crystal Witches, also known as Whites, House Petra, House Beltran. Cosmic Witches, also known as Purples, House Realta, House Amar. Earth Witches, also known as Greens, House Mediza, House Bray. Air Witches, also known as Greys, House Ori, House DeVoe. Water Witches, also known as Blues, House Tethys, House Hawthorne. Sex Desire Witches, also known as Reds, House Erodis, House Peabody. Fire Witches, also known as Yellows, House Collins, House Madluck. Necromancy Witches, also known as Blacks, House Hecate. The Coven. Prologue. Alaric Grayson Thorne. In the 329 years since my making, I'd come to appreciate the finer things in life. The beauty of the meticulously cut colored glass in the arched windows and the prisms of light they cast over the dark stone tile of the halls at Hallow Groves University was only one of those. It was not to be diminished by the tantalizing scent of witch's blood drifting from the messenger escorting me to the tribunal room. The Covenant wouldn't wait long for anyone, not even the male they'd appointed as the headmaster of their precious school. Cobwebs and dust lined the pathway before us, and I turned up my nose at the way the university had fallen into disrepair since I'd last set foot in it 50 years prior. The witch at my side stopped before the tribunal gates at the end of the hall. She waved a well-manicured hand over the lock, watching as the iron and gold mechanisms rotated until it parted. Gears turned slowly, the ripple effect sliding up until the rest of the locks followed suit. The bars lashed across the seam where the two doors meet finally retreated, the soft click of them opening a signal for the witch to grasp the handle. "How many generations separate you and George Collins' sister?" I asked, forcing the witch to pinch her lips as she looked over her shoulder at me. 9 generations separate the Covenant and me, she said with a sneer. The witches were always so testy when discussing what had become of their leaders, of the 2 witches who'd commanded them through the centuries. Susanna Mediza and George Collins were no longer replaced by the 2 halves of the Covenant when Charlotte Hecate raised them from their graves. "A shame," I said with a grin. "Sarah Collins was quite lovely before she died. It is unfortunate she wasn't able to pass along that to her descendants." The witch's face fell with shock as I stepped through the gate she opened. I turned to the right and moved toward the tribunal room where the Covenant waited for me. My escort remained at the gates, the good little puppy her great-great-great-whatever grandmother had seen fit to raise her to become. "You're one to talk, you undead bastard," she called out behind me. I adjusted the jacket of my suit, straightening the lapel as I grasped both the inner doors of the tribunal and swiftly pulled them open. The Covenant sat in the gilded chairs they'd had fashioned centuries ago, skeletal fingers grasping the arms as what had once been Susanna Mediza leaned forward. Her hood shifted to the side, allowing some of the sunlight shining through the kaleidoscope windows at the side of the circular chamber to illuminate what remained of her face. The flesh had long since rotted from her body, leaving only the gaunt shape of a skeleton to stare back at me. Her neck tipped at an unnatural angle where it had snapped when they hanged her, the slightest slant to the side displaying the manner of her death all those years ago. Her eye sockets remained empty, even as she somehow saw me. "Tormenting our children once again, Headmaster Thorne?" she asked, that eerie, ageless voice stretching between us. She tapped the tip of her finger bone against the arm of her chair in a steady staccato that I felt like a strike to my impatience. The other half of her magic stepped behind her, the masculine equivalent to her feminine. George Collins had no descendants to his name to be defensive of, not with the prophecy that determined the Coven's rules, forcing male witches to make the choice, children or their magic. He was just as skeletal as Susanna, but his neck carved to the other side. What I could see of his bones revealed deep slash marks etched into them, lingering evidence of the torture he'd sustained in the hours before his death. I have to presume you did not summon me here to discuss my manners with your grandniece, Covenant, I said, gritting my teeth. My kind were not meant to be subservient to any, but the magic that kept us bound to the flesh of our vessels, made us reliant on the witches if we ever wanted to be freed from the bodies that trapped us. We thought it a blessing to never need to possess a new form, to have a body that could hold us for an eternity. We thought wrong. We have decided to open the university, George said, speaking before the female counterpart could interject. We all need fresh blood. The attention we suffered as a result of that day has long since faded from memory. As much as I, too, would appreciate new blood to feed upon, I have to urge caution in opening our walls once more. Rumors were spread the moment we announced our reopening, I said, looking between the two skeletons staring at me. 2 generations of witches have been left to learn their magic in the privacy of their home, Susanna said, rising from her throne. Her black cloak wrapped around her and hid her bones from view as she stepped toward the dais stairs. The time has come for them to be properly educated. We will only open our doors to 12 new students from outside Crystal Hollow every year, and we have personally selected those who will join us based on the power we've detected. There will be no formal announcement, she said. She held out a list, her messy cursive writing displaying the names of those she'd selected. What assurance do we have that we will not suffer a repeat of last time? I asked, thinking only of the safety of my kind. While we were difficult to kill, some of us had been harmed in the massacre that had occurred 50 years prior, where someone had hunted down 13 students at Hollow's Grove and a vessel over the course of a week. If we do not open our doors once again, the witches will have no one left to breed with. If we die out, so will your kind. Do not forget that you require the blood of our people to sustain you, Alaric, Susanna said, turning her back on me and making her way to the throne that waited for her. I gritted my teeth, forcing my body into the shallowest of bows. As if you could ever allow me to forget such a thing, I said, crumpling the list in my hand. Although perhaps you should focus more on the reason the population of witches has been dwindling faster than we anticipated. I wonder why that might be, Covenant. I turned my back on them without waiting for a response to the games we played, the muscle in my cheek jumping when they couldn't see it. Fucking witches.